Okay, we'll pick it up here in the third of these videos regarding this problem 511, which is, like we talked about before, it had a little bit of a blow in the dimension down at the bottom. And so I'm going to point out now we're going to get into dimensioning. And when we talk about dimensioning, there's actually, you really need to talk about a little bit more than dimension. You need to talk about the idea of styles. So we noticed before, I think, that with the dimension toolbar here, which I've got up, there's the dimension toolbar, that there is a dimension style, but we don't want to forget that there is also a toolbar, which is styles, which includes the dimension style, the text style, the table style, and then the annotative or the multi-leader style. So this toolbar here is the one that controls all of your styles, and we have to remember that text style is kind of one of the more important ones. I'm going to point out here one rule. We remember the one rule for dimensioning, and that is that, in fact, if you're going to change the style, you modify it, you change it in one spot and one spot only, and that is on the Fit tab. And we'll see there's a lot more things you can change here in terms of everything else, but we want to make sure that if you get a good dimension style set up, you just change the Fit tab. When it comes to the text style, the one thing to remember is to never change the height in the style, but to control the height itself. And you'll notice that comes up in a lot of our templates. Changing the height here and control it in the style is not a good idea. So I haven't updated all those templates, but generally you control the height itself as a property of the entity, unless you get into annotative dimensions, and we won't really be doing much of that this semester. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this close. I'm going to put us back to the current, set the current dimension style, the current tactile to dimension, then the dimension style, we're just going to keep it at standard here. Now I'm going to point out one can dimension on the paper. You're going to see that that's what Inventor does, but I do want you to learn the dimension in the model. And of course, the way you go about it's actually interesting enough. You want to go here and you want to use your eye, since you've got the paper there, in terms of setting up the style. So I'm going to go ahead and hit a pause here and get the door. And so you, like many of me, have busy houses because it is spring break week for the kids. So, all right, so one way to go about dimensioning is just to do a dimension. So I'm going to go ahead and then, once you get one in, change your Fit tab. So you can be more thoughtful about it, I'm sure, but very often, if you're working in one scale, it won't be an issue. So I'm going to go ahead and just try this here. I'm going to click that one and the second line. I'm going to stick a dimension out here. And then we're going to take a look at that dimension. Now, right away you want to realize you want to get very good at about getting your dimensions on the right layer. So obviously my current layer should be dimension, and then of course I can grab that and change it to dimension. So if I'm going to do dimensioning, I should be putting my things on the dimension layer. Now, so we had a number of angles there, and you can realize you can set up different dimension styles for different things. Now if we notice here, this is reporting it to two places. Now I want to point out at this point the difference between the units command, which I'm going to type, which is controlling how precise you report things, and the dim style command, where you get in here and you modify and it tells you what things are reported to. So for instance here we're reporting our, even then remember it's just the Fit tab you're usually worrying about, but you can change what you're reporting for your dimension style, and so we're going to change the precision on that to one place. You see all kinds of other clicks and things you can do here, and in the end, if you look at the distances here, they were reporting to two places. So we go ahead and change that right away. We go ahead and we set current. And now it kind of looks about right. You go back and check here in your paper and everything looks about right. Realistically, the one rule we have for text is that it should be no smaller than 1/8 of an inch on the page. And so even if you're avoiding the concept of having to do math, you can zoom in sometimes and just check, because when you're here, you're in something called paper space. So when you click here and just do a little line on top of something, right, a line from there to there, you can list the last thing you drafted, and it's about 1/10 of an inch, so it's not quite as big as you'd like it to be based on the scaling you got there. So you might want to go back and change in the end dim style, and you can change modify the style, and you can change the text to be, there it is, 0.15 high, so you might want to go ahead and change that to be 0.18. Hit OK, set current. So you can see you can go around and change some things and not have to worry about it, and you can always go back later. So we've got the 45 degrees dimensioned. We can go ahead and practice some of those angular here, since you're in the angle. Very often you can do a vertex as well. So I'm going to go ahead and specify the vertex. Well, that doesn't really do it. We're going to go from here to here. We're going to place that as 30 degrees. I'm zooming out, zooming in. Once again, dimension. And you start to see very often, to make it look nice, you want to really grab some snaps once you get it in there. So I'm going to go do the dimension again from there to there. And again, I can now at that point go shift right click to the end point of that, and it kind of doesn't do it for me. So I'm going to go undo. That snap doesn't always work, so you just want to go ahead and go from there to there. Emulating that in. So those were a couple of them. You have the 45, the 45, the 30. Now you can try some of these radial ones, and that's where it can start to get tricky, and we'll start working on adjustments. But we can go ahead and do some of these radial ones. And so I want to definitely show the diameter immediately before the radial, and so I'm going to go ahead and do the diameter here. You notice it puts that nice symbol for diameter across. Now, how that diameter goes all the way across is going to be an investigation for the next video. So the diameter symbol is there. It's given as opposed to going all the way across. And of course the radius there. As I grab these things, I can tend to start to go and put them where I want them to be. I can now grab the radius at the outside as it's shown. And we're going to see now, in effect, where some of these kind of setups are going to become important, and you start to notice the slight differences in how bad this will seem if these things are not kind of parallel to each other. So you can kind of spread that thing around, spread that out, at least visually. Right, if you notice here, that's going to look a lot better if you kind of move some of the stuff around up. So you really want to start to concentrate on the look of it, and we won't keep going much beyond that for now. Notice here, we can do the linear dimensions, and I want to point out before we run out of time here, a really big one that we've seen before is this idea of marking centers. And so the fact that there's a lot of centers marked in this drawing, and that center marking, as you're going to see, is one of these things that you're going to want to adjust and have different dimension symbols for different things. So go ahead and mark the centers there. And a lot of these other ones, you can see the centers were all tended to be marked. Center that one there. And in fact, it was here as well. So the center marking is going to be something you're going to very often have different adjustments for. Even to the point that you can dimension a center of a fillet, which then gives you something you can radius out. Let's go ahead and get that from there. And in the end, remember the dimension that was blown, and that was, of course, this one here. Now I will, the difference between where this one here, if you notice that radius 2.04, that's not correct. Well, it actually probably is correct. Let me go ahead and get this wrong. You're looking down. Remember, it is 2.04 on the outside there. If you remember, I'm going to go ahead and grab that. That was the blown dimension. And of course, this one was a little different. However, this one here would have been less than that. Now, that was in fact, at some point this radius changes, and if you notice there, it changes right at that point. So this is radius 2.09, and then when you get inside here, the dimension is significantly different. Now, how we mark up the dimension in the center, we'll look at in the next video. Just learn to click around, get things on the right layer. Thanks for listening. We'll investigate more dimensioning later.